Hello and welcome to Motion Graphics Basic Training. This is part 5 of a 6-part tutorial series where I'll be teaching you how to create this. In the last tutorials, we learned how to create our main scene and badge. In this tutorial, let's look at how to animate our main scene. I'm Arun Gopidas and let's get started. I hope you guys still have the file that we saved from tutorial 3, and if in case you don't, I have provided a link. Download that file in the description below and let's get started. I'm going to go into my project window and double click to import my file, or I can just go into file, import, file, and click on frame to animate, import as composition, retain layer sizes, and open it. Now I have the composition inside my project window. Now what we are going to do is we are going to double click on frame to animate to open it up. And now there are a couple of things that's currently wrong with it. Firstly, that it's 30 seconds long and it's written over here, it's a 30 seconds long, but I want to make sure my project file is set correctly. So I'll right click here and go to composition settings to check what the settings for my composition are. So it's 1920 by 1080 pixels, 23.976, and it's 30 frames right now. One way would be to change this 30 to 10 seconds over here, but that's not what we're going to do. So we'll hit cancel over here. And what I'd rather do is go to 10 seconds on my timeline and I'll drag this blue cap over here to match 10. So I can press shift to make it snap into place. So now if you see, there's a slight gray area with two blue caps, and this is supposed to be our work area. So everything that we animate will be inside this. So if I go to around 9 seconds and hit spacebar to get a preview, you can see that now it loops from 1 again. So it goes to 10 and it comes back. And another thing that I want to do is I want to right click on this and do trim composition to work area. So now I don't see any of the extra area beyond this. So our entire composition is set to exactly 10 seconds. So now we are at a good place to begin our animation. So I'll first click on the background, and I know my background is not going to have any animation. So now let's move on to the mountain. So the mountain is somewhere over here on layer number 4. So one of the first thing that I want to do is I want to bring it down so that it's correct in the hierarchy for me. And so how it works is the background would be the bottommost layer and the subsequent layers will be on top of each other. So with the mountain, if you remember from the intro that I showed, there are two mountains in the scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press on mountain and press Ctrl D or Command D to duplicate this layer. So now I have mountain and mountain 2. So I can also do Ctrl C and Ctrl V, Command C, Command V to do the same thing. And now what I want to do is I want to click on mountain 2 and I just drag it to the right while I press shift. So now I can see there are two mountains. And now I'll just bring it down a little bit so that I have two differing heights. And now I'll go back to my mountain and I'll drag it to the left. And then I'll just play around with it till I get a pleasing composition. Okay, so that seems right about correct to me. And now what I want to do is I want to distinguish which one is what. So I'll click on my mountain and I know this mountain is on the left of my frame. So I can hit enter on the layer to rename it. So the first one is going to be mountain left. And the second mountain, I'll press enter to rename again, and I'll write mountain right. So now I have two mountains, mountain left and mountain right. So I want to animate my mountain left first. So I'll click on mountain left and press P to bring up the position for that. And I'll hit the position stopwatch to create a keyframe. And now I'll go to roughly around 2 seconds and I'll make another keyframe. So this is going to be my final position. And now I'll go back to keyframe 0 and I'll drag my mountain down while I press shift so that it snaps correctly, so that it snaps in a straight line. And now I'll go into mountain right. Okay, so I want to animate mountain right as well, but I'm going to use parenting to animate that since they both will move at the same speed. So now I'll go to 2 seconds and right around here I'll use my pick to pick it and attach it to mountain left. So now what you can see is both my mountains move at the same speed at the same time. So this is another common mistake that people do. So I could go to frame 1 and pick at this point. thinking, like it's the same thing, the same thing would happen if I pick quick at any time. But now what happens is, as my mountain comes up, my mountain right actually goes out of the frame. So you can use scroll to zoom in and zoom out, the scroll wheel on your mouse to zoom in and zoom out, or you can zoom in with this. So now what's happening is that this mountain will go up. So that's not what we want. So I'll just do Control Z again, and what's important is that I'll go to the correct time where I know the positions are correct, and then I'll pick wicket to mountain left. So now these things will animate together. So now the next thing I want to animate is the watchtower. So before that, I want to attach my CCTV camera to my watchtower since both of them move together. So I'll pick it and I'll put it on the watchtower. So whenever my watchtower is moving, my CCTV will also move. And now I'll go into 1 second and hit P on my keyboard to bring up the position parameters for the watchtower. And I'll hit the stopwatch to create a keyframe. Then I'll go to around 3 seconds and I'll make another keyframe over here. And now what I'll do is I'll go into 1 second to change the position to right outside my frame. So now you can see that my mountain comes up first and then my watchtower comes up after that with a slight delay. Now the next thing that I want to do is to animate the barbed wires. So right after the mountains start coming, maybe a second later, I want this to animate. I'll zoom out a little bit using the scroll wheel on my mouse, and I'll go to my foreground and hit position on this as well, and I'll hit the stopwatch to create a keyframe. Then so I'm using these as my reference. Okay, so I want it to be similar to the movement but not exactly the same. So for the watchtower, this is where it starts. So a few frames after that is where my foreground begins animating, and then as soon as my watchtower ends the animation, a few seconds after that is when I want my foreground to stop animating. So about at this time, I'll hit the keyframe and make another position keyframe. Now I'll go back to my first keyframe, and another way to go back to my first keyframe, instead of doing it every time like this. So if I'm on this keyframe or I'm anywhere else, I can just hit on this small arrow to go directly to the previous keyframe. And now I can just drag this down, and I think my animation should be done. Okay, so I think that seems fine to me right now. Maybe slightly before. Yeah, I think that seems perfect. Maybe I can start this slightly earlier as well. Okay, so now these things are animated. Now let's move on to the clouds. So I'll press on the big cloud and I'll hit the position keyframe on this. I'll hit the stopwatch to create a keyframe. And now I want this cloud to animate. So I think my entire composition is going to be roughly around 7 seconds. So this is where all my animation would end. So I'll just move till 8 seconds and make another position keyframe. So this is going to be my final position. Actually, my final position can be slightly more to the right, somewhere over here. And then my starting position is going to be somewhere over here. So my cloud is going to travel from 0 seconds to around 8 seconds. Similarly for my small cloud, I'll go to my small cloud, press P to bring up the position, hit the stopwatch, and then go into around 8 seconds and make another keyframe over here. And for the last position of my small cloud would be somewhere over here. Okay, so now here's where things get interesting. So this cloud is cut in half. We don't have the entire cloud over here. Now obviously it's a very small thing, so we could ignore it, but we are not going to ignore it. So I can click on my small cloud, right click it and reveal in Finder. So now this opens up my Illustrator file. So I can just double click this, and this is the dynamic link I was talking about. So whatever changes you do to this will get reflected over there as well. And now I'll just bring this inside and then save it. So this is what I was talking about. Anything outside this artboard will not be visible in After Effects or when you export it. So now I have saved it. I'll go back to my After Effects file, and now my cloud is complete. So what I'll do now is, so this is going to be my ending position for the cloud, and the starting position is going to be slightly outside. Okay, so that seems fine. The two clouds animate individually at their own speeds, but I don't really want these clouds to appear like this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use opacity on my cloud so that it slowly fades in. So right about at around 1 second, when the mountains start coming in, that's when I'll go into my big cloud and my small cloud, and I'll press T on my keyboard. Now T brings up the opacity parameters for the layers, and I can hit, okay, I can either hit it together so that both the keyframes are formed together, and then I'll probably go a little bit ahead in time, say around 216 at the time code, and then press this to create two more keyframes. So for the first one, we want to make this 0. So now it goes from 0 to 100. Now we don't want both the clouds to fade in together because that looks quite fishy. So what we'll do is the first one can remain here and the second one we'll shift it a little bit. So I'll select both of them together by clicking and dragging, and then just move it to here. So now what happens is the first cloud comes and it's moving, and the second cloud also moves. Okay, so maybe this is also not right. So maybe at around this much, first one goes and the second one comes in. Yeah, I think that seems correct to me. Okay, now what we are left with is the comet. So the comet, after everything comes in, probably at around 6 seconds is where I want the comet to come in. So I'll go to my comet at this time and hit P on the keyboard to bring up the position parameters, and hit the stopwatch to create a keyframe. And I'll go to around 7 seconds, create another keyframe, and the last keyframe I'll just bring it over here, and in the first keyframe I'll drag it outside my frame. So this line is going to be how my comet travels. Okay, so now that doesn't really follow the line properly. So if you see, this comet is not aligned properly. So what I can just do is I can press R to bring up my rotation and just rotate it slightly till I get the right angle. So I think this seems correct to me, and now it should follow. Okay, that looks nice. Okay, so I can go to comet and press U to bring up all the keyframes again, and I think it seems slightly too slow for a comet, so I'll reduce the time and I'll click and drag the last keyframe and bring it inside. So now it's slightly faster. Okay, so now what's going wrong is that a comet is in front of all the other layers. So I'll click on the comet and drag it right above our background layers. So now our mountains come, watchtower comes, barbed wires come, the clouds are animating, and then we have the comet. Okay, so that seems fine. And now for the final step, we just to press Ctrl A to select all of them together and hitting U on the keyboard so that everything collapses. And now we'll press U again to show all the keyframes that we have. And then we are going to click and drag till we select all the keyframes visible and hit F9 on the keyboard. So if you look carefully, our diamond shapes have now become these Bezier shapes. So what now happens is that instead of being a linear path for the animation, everything eases out slightly. So this is how it looks like finally. So everything is a lot more smoother and things just look much better. So the final thing that I want to do is go to 7 seconds on my timeline and hit N, because I don't want it to be 10 seconds long. I think 7 is good enough. And I'll just do trim comp to work area. And now this is the animation that we have. And roughly around here, the badge will come in, and yep, that seems good. So this is where the tutorial ends for most of you, and because the next tutorial is a bonus tutorial. So what I also want to touch upon is how to export this out of the software. So right now it's currently inside the software, and if you want to give it to somebody, you will probably need to export it in some format. And for that, you need to make sure that you are inside the composition and go to File, Export, and Add to Render Queue. And now when you do that, it'll bring up this render queue, and here is our composition. So you can change the settings from here, and you can change some settings from here, and you can change where you want to save the file from here. And then all you need to do is hit render and your animation will be sorted. Alternatively, what you can do is go to frame to animate and press Command Shift and the question mark, and it'll add your composition to the render queue. And I'll just render it once. So now you can see the project is being rendered. And now if you go into your project file, you'll see the file over there. And that brings us to the end of part 5. Honestly, we have covered everything that I wanted to cover, but if you want to learn how to animate that badge, stay tuned for the next tutorial which drops very soon. And consider subscribing to my channel if you liked the tutorial series so far, and I'll see you soon.